Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. To start off our day, may I invite everyone to stand for the invocation to be led by Mr. Josgado Garalde Jr.
Let us put ourselves in the holy presence of the Lord. Lord, thank you for this beautiful Tuesday morning and for this chance to gather for another opportunity to learn. We thank you that you promise to be with us always. Thank you for the willingness and safe arrival of our esteemed guests who have traveled distances to be with us and share of themselves. It is our prayer that each person here in this hall today will be able to bring home a new idea, understand a new concept, and better appreciate the realities of this industry we have chosen to be part of, and the complicated yet wonderful world we all live in. With these new thoughts, may we all find the resolve to be the best tourism and hospitality professionals we can be, both present and future, to be able to serve our best. For your great glory, all of this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
May I request everyone to remain standing for the Philippine National Anthem.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Edition of the Tourism Knowledge Center's Travel Talk. Before anything else, we would like to acknowledge the presence and support of our guests this morning, the Department of Tourism, the Intramuros Administration, officers and members of the Philippine Travel Agencies Association, officers and members of the Philippine Tour Operators Associations, officers and members of the Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, officers and members of the Joint Foreign Chambers of Commerce, faculty and students from the following schools and universities: Centro Escolar University, Makati, College of St. Benilde. Oh, good morning. De La Salle Araneta University, Lyceum of the Philippines University, Our Lady of Fatima University, PATS College of Aeronautics, Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Maynila, Philippine Women's University, Polytechnic University of the Philippines, and San Beda College, Alabang. Welcome, everybody. To start off our morning, let us welcome to the stage the CITHM Cultural Dance Troupe. They won the Grand Champion for Cultural Dance in the recent UFTE 2019. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you to the CITHM Cultural Dance Troupe for the excellent presentation. Without further ado, I would like to call on stage Dr. Conrado Indigo, Vice President for Academic Affairs, Lyceum of the Philippines, University, Manila, for our welcome remarks.
To Ms. Eileen Clemente, Chairman and President of Raja Travel Corporation, Dr. Maria Sherilyn Rodolfo of Raja Travel, the former Undersecretary of the Department of Tourism, Mr. Alan Canizal. He is also our alumnus of the Lyceum of the Philippines University. Welcome back, Yusek Canizal. Mr. Francis Mark Kimba of the Philippine Institute for Development Studies. Mr. John Ports, Chairman of the American Chambers of the Philippines. Dr. Mundita Lim, the Executive Director of the ASEAN Center for Diversity. Attorney Lucas Nunag, owner of Amarela Resort, Panglao Island, Bohol. Attorney Guler Biasido, Administrator of the Intramuros Administration. Dean Dr. Lilibet C. Argon, the Dean of the College of International Tourism and Hospitality Management of Lyceum of the Philippines, University, Manila. Faculty members, students from the different schools, not only in NCR, but I think we have also delegates from Cavite. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of our President, Attorney Roberto P. Laurel, it is my distinct honor and great pleasure to welcome you to this very significant activity, the first travel talk, jointly undertaken by Raja Travel Corporation and Lyceum of the Philippines University. Now, according to the World Tourism Organization of the United Nations, tourism is one of the growing industries in the world, and they even projected around 1.6 billion tourists next year, 2020. Imagine that, 1.6 billion or even more than 1.6 billion tourists by next year. And with that, it has contributed in the GDP growth, not only in the Philippines but in the world. They are projecting a contribution of 5 to 7% to our GDP, the gross domestic product. So, consequently, with the development in tourism or growth of tourism industry, what are the consequences? First, we need to improve our infrastructure. Second, we need a system that protects our environment. And of course, the third would be we need to preserve and even respect the culture of a community. So these are the major consequences of the tourism growth, not only in the Philippines, but in the world. So today, we're going to tackle and discuss challenges and opportunities for sustainable tourism, or what we call responsible tourism. Now, in the context of our vision and mission statements, the LPU's vision and mission statements, or even the trifocal functions of any school or higher education institution, namely instruction, research, and extension. The objectives of today's activity are really directly aligned with these three functions, namely instruction. So for instruction, I would like to recommend or propose not only to Raja Travel or LPU or ICU, but to all schools offering tourism and hospitality management to integrate responsible tourism and sustainable tourism not only as one subject, but in all subjects. So you can integrate responsible tourism and sustainable tourism in all professional subjects of tourism or even hospitality management programs. Second, sustainable research. I know that the sustainable research practice is still a challenge because there is disconnect between the academe and the industry. And I would like to congratulate and commend Raja Travel Corporation for your initiative in your strategic roadmap towards sustainable research, and by undertaking research with academic institutions. And by next month, I heard from the chairman and president of Raja, Ms. Clemente, you will publish the first research jointly undertaken by Raja Travel and Lyceum of the Philippines University. So we know that other schools can follow that research undertaking, and that's a very important activity for us to help improve or develop sustainable tourism or responsible tourism. Now for the third function, extension or community extension program, I think in the tourism industry, you're using the term voluntourism, coming from the words volunteer tourism. So it's also your responsibility to serve the community, to serve the society, and that is by offering your service for the purpose of improving the quality of life of all communities. So ladies and gentlemen, our partner industries and the schools just concentrate on these three functions and you can contribute in the deployment of responsible tourism and sustainable tourism, not only in the country, but in the world. So lastly, I would like to congratulate Raja Travel Corporation and Lyceum of the Philippines University for the success of the first travel talk in the Philippines. And I firmly believe that they have contributed in the deployment of responsible tourism or sustainable tourism. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you, Dr. Inigo, for the warm welcome. May I now call to the stage Ms. Aileen Clemente, Chairman and President of Raja Travel Corporation, for her inspirational message.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I hope you don't mind that I will not acknowledge all of you by name, but I will want to say my extreme gratitude to all of our industry friends and family, our government friends, our academic friends, our students, our industry partners, and family. Thank you from the bottom of my heart to those who are present here today, as well as those joining us online in this first Travel Talk series organized by the Tourism Knowledge Center of Raja Travel Corporation. This is really a milestone and a blessing, as the Tourism Knowledge Center was just once upon a time a dream. And with Twinkle Rodolfo and Alan Carizal, this dream became a reality. The Tourism Knowledge Center is meant to be a one-stop shop data repository meant to be shared and teaching people how to share so that we can have more evidence-based discussions on tourism-related things. We also want to be able to tackle discussions on very debatable issues and bring forth recommendations. We want to also, most importantly, put the value of research front and center and veer away from knee-jerk reactions that are probably more sexy sometimes because they are visual. We want to make research just as visual and just as visible because they are proof of things over time. And luckily, we were really overwhelmed by the reception and support that we got from everyone, especially the government and academe, on this very idea. And we thank those who have already become our pioneer partners, including, of course, Lyceum of the Philippines, who has sponsored our venue today, and as well as also we want to thank some national government agencies like Intramuros Administration, Attorney Asidas here, and other local government unions who have expressed their support. I would like to make special mention our Tourism Knowledge Center Executive Director, who really embodied his title, Alan Canisal. I think, please stand up just so everyone will recognize. So just as his title says, he really executed and really directed this whole event as well as every activity of the Tourism Knowledge Center and made the TKC what it is today. His journey from government to private sector is really one for the books. So Alan, thank you for the optimal hard work. Thank you to you and the rest of the team. As Sandra's not here, Sandra, Joe, and Vern, and the rest of the executive office team. Today is really, really overwhelming for us. Today is also a historical and special moment, not only because this is the official launch of the Tourism Knowledge Center and also having the first of these Travel Talk series, but also because we are also launching the first microsite website of Fort Santiago as part of our agreement with the Intramuros Administration. If you haven't seen it, we will have a kiosk later, and please be with us later for that momentous occasion after the formal travel talk. Thank you, everyone. Mark this also as a milestone, and remember that you are now a part of this. In kicking off the discussion, I would like to end with some photos, and hopefully we can also provoke your critical thinking. So, is this overcrowding? Or is this merely a crowd? So, if I would say that this is a rock concert, probably you would answer the previews. But if I told you that this was a prayer rally with the Pope at the center, what would your reaction be? It would be different, right? So it really depends. As they say, pictures speak 1,000 words. But what words do they speak? It really depends. But actually, that was a concert of Blake Shelton in Atlanta. So it's not the above. This one, the flooding of Venice. Is the flooding of Venice a cause of concern? Or has that been happening over a period of time? Have we looked at our basins, our catch basins, our drainage, our tributaries? How do they look? Do we map it out? Have we seen them? Do we look at them? Do we look at the rivers and also create flood controls? Or are we just looking at the top part of the landscape and not what is below? So I hope that these are just some of the things that provoke you. This is the last one. This is Thomas Edison's office, during his time, it was at Menlo Park, New Jersey. Is it preserved? Would it have been preserved if it was still in New Jersey? It is actually now in the Ford Museum. It was taken so that it could be preserved. And the Ford Museum is actually one of the highest research grants provider. It is an innovator and actually provides us with tools for those who would like to help preserve history. So again, what do we see? What do we know? And what should we do? With that, I start the morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Clemente, for your inspiring message. I would now like to introduce our panel facilitator, Dr. Maria Cherilyn Rodolfo. She is a consultant in tourism and tourism infrastructure of the Asia Foundation, member of the Board of Advisors of the Asian Institute of Management Andrew Tan Center for Tourism, and member of the Review Committee of the Raja Travel Corporation Tourism Knowledge Center. Let's all welcome on stage Dr. Rodolfo.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Mayor. And thank you to Dr. Inigo and again for the very inspirational messages. You have accurately set the tone for today's travel talk. So I will introduce our session and our panelists. Let me just say that this travel talk session, especially this first part, we will have two speakers, Dr. Kim and Dr. Lim, allow us to explore the learnings and insights from the experience of the Boracay Island closure, but more importantly, on the sustainable and responsible measures that we can all pursue in order to change the storyline from what we call the tragedy of the commons to the triumph of the Filipino people for tourism development. And as we all know, most of our assets, both natural and cultural assets, are common resources which are very much subject to degradation, but that shouldn't allow us or that shouldn't stop us from actually pursuing tourism development, because after all, we can also make it sustainable and responsible if we work together. And that is precisely the purpose of this travel talk, to introduce the members of the network that we will continue to build, that we will continue to deepen, and that we will continue to broaden, not just here in the island of Luzon, but across the Philippine archipelago, so that we can all work together for a common cause, and that is balancing the economic, cultural, and environmental conservation efforts for tourism development. So we are very fortunate today that we have with us Dr. Francis Mark Kimba, Research Fellow from the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, and he also serves as Director for the APEC Study Center Network. So he oversees the research agenda and implementation for APEC-related issues. He specializes in economic policy research, particularly in the areas of rural development, agriculture, and trade. Now, our second panelist is Dr. Teresa Monita Lim, whom some of you might have met during her stint with the Department of Environment and Natural Resources for quite some time. She now serves as Executive Director of the ASEAN Biodiversity Center, where she facilitates actually a number of regional initiatives so that we could all work together and learn from practices, particularly of businesses and private sector members, on how we can actually manage our resources and use them to our advantage, and at the same time also allow the communities living within the environs of those resources to benefit economically, culturally, socially, environmentally, not just today, but also for tomorrow or in the future. So now I'd like to call on Dr. Francis Mark Kimba to deliver his presentation on the Boracay Island closure experience, socioeconomic consequences, and resilience management. And he will be followed by Dr. Monita Lim, who will discuss the role of the business enterprises in resource management. Thank you.
Okay, good morning. Before I begin, let me just thank the organizers for inviting the Philippine Institute for Development Studies to give this presentation. And also as a background, I am just part of the team that worked on this presentation last year when we were asked by the Board of Trustees of the Philippine Institute for Development Studies to explore the impact of closing the Boracay Island to tourists. All right, so these are the members of the team. Dr. Celia Reyes is the president of the Philippine Institute for Development Studies. Dr. Albert and myself are research fellows. And we also had the assistance of Cristina Ortiz and Ronina Assis, who are also staff at the IDS. So I am here to present the study which essentially aims to assess ex ante the impact of the Boracay closure to the economy. A quick estimate that what we are trying to do is, or what we wanted to do is to provide a quick estimate of the impact without really looking too much about what's going to be the benefit for the environment. Because it's very difficult to quantify impacts to the environment. So essentially what we are just looking at is what's the cost? What would be the cost of closing? The benefits, maybe it will come in a next study. So this is how the presentation will proceed. So first, let me tell you about what's happening, what happened with the Boracay closure, and then maybe a profile of the Boracay Island. But maybe I don't need to because I'm sure everyone's familiar with the island. How much are we going to lose, or how much will we lose if we close the island using some economic models, and then ways forward, of course. So what happened? The Boracay closure aims to address ecological issues in the Boracay Island. So the government decided to close the island from entry of local and foreign tourists for 6 months, starting April 26. The sewerage system is not properly integrated in the island for businesses and residents alike. And we found, using data from the local government and from the Philippine Statistics Authority, that only 2/3 of the 578 business customers of the Boracay Island Water Company are connected to the sewerage treatment plant. Also, only 1 in 5 DOT-accredited hotels and restaurants are connected to the main sewer system, and the rest dispose directly at sea. So, because of all these issues, the decision was unanimously made by DENR, DILG, and DOT to close the island. But what is this island? Sorry. So what is this island that we're talking about? So the Boracay Island is part of the municipality of Malay in the province of Aklan. I'm sure you know. And it is 10.32 square kilometer island. It has a population of about 32,267 across 3 barangays, with mainland Malay accounting for 20,706 residents. And this is a profile of the businesses and establishments in the island. For how do you interpret this slide? For example, in the accommodation and food and beverage sector, 94.2% of the workers there in the province of in Malay, the municipality of Malay, 94.2 are actually working in the island of Boracay. And as you can see, for almost all key sectors and industries in the municipality, majority is actually contained in the island of Boracay, and that is true for almost for passenger transport, recreation, retail trade, travel agents, and even other sectors. And if we look at it in the general picture, overall, on average, Boracay employs 85.9% of Malay's 17,229 workers and 72.6% of the 4,500 registered businesses as of December 2017. So one could think that the island is actually the focal point of business and employment in the island. So looking at the National Household Targeting System for Poverty Reduction to provide us a data in terms of poor persons and non-poor persons in the island, we found that the majority of the poor in Boracay are laborers and unskilled workers, followed by those working in special occupations. The majority of poor in mainland Malay are laborers and unskilled workers, followed by farmers, forestry workers, and fishermen. And the majority of the poor in Malay are laborers and unskilled workers, followed by farmers, forestry workers, and fishermen. For the non-poor, the majority of non-poor in Boracay are plant and machine operators and assemblers, followed by laborers and unskilled workers. The majority for the mainland Malay are laborers and unskilled workers, followed by plant and machine operators and assemblers. So one can think that those who get wages coming from the bigger, as laborers and as plant and machine operators, tend to have better income and become non-poor. While those who are working as farmers and as unskilled workers tend to have lower income and actually become poor. So looking at data in terms of profile of tourist arrivals, the most popular of Boracay's beaches is the White Beach, stretching 4 kilometers and one of the longest of its kind in Asia. Most tourism development is focused on the Barangay Balabag, where White Beach is located, and leading alternatives to Boracay in Southeast Asia are Bali, Indonesia, and Phuket, Thailand. So from 2001 to 2017, visitor headcounts and tourist receipts in Boracay have been consistently increasing each year. The highest increase in visitor arrivals was in 2012 at 32.7% growth. Visitor receipts in terms of millions of pesos has grown at an average of 16.5% annually from 4.9 billion to 2001 to 56.1 billion in 2017. I think I have an additional data there. So about the growth of tourist receipts so Boracay tourist receipts account for 20% of Philippine tourist receipts in 2015 and 2016. That's an important statistic. So I want you to remember that as we go along towards the results of the CGE model. So 20% of the Philippine tourist receipts is accounted for by Boracay. So what are the reasons why the Boracay was closed? So these are just some of the reasons that were identified in literature and in other earlier studies. So low sewerage, violations of laws, non-compliance in coliform standards, and destroyed wetland areas. So given this, we were tasked to find out what is the impact of the Boracay island closure. If we're going to close the island, we were asked, what is it going to cost the government or the economy of the Philippines? So how did we do this? So we used an analysis using the input-output table and some reasonable assumptions. What did we do? So we used data from the PSA that suggests that Boracay contributed 20% to total Philippine tourism, or about 48.9 billion in 2016. And then we made some assumptions. What are these? For instance, under the assumption that domestic and foreign tourists would behave differently when faced with the closure, Philippines would only be losing a small portion of the 20% of tourism receipts. For instance, if you are a local tourist and you find out that the Boracay is going to be closed, then you can be diverted, or you would divert your travel to maybe Bohol or Cebu or somewhere near. Limitations in available data prevent the modeling of an accurate distribution of the loss from the closure, differentiating between domestic and local tourists. But it would be safe to assume that domestic tourists would more likely divert to other tourist spots, as I mentioned, thereby preserving tourist receipts. As for foreign tourists, their capacity to proceed to other tourist spots in the country would be dependent on their knowledge of other tourist spots and as well as their spending power. So what did we do? So we had three assumptions. So first, the scenario is a 5% reduction of the tourist receipts. This is the good scenario. Then we had a medium scenario, 10% reduction of the tourist receipts. And then the scenario is 20% reduction, or almost an entire closure of the Boracay Island. So here are the results. So for instance, using the input-output analysis, we find that these are the sectors that would be adversely affected. And then in terms of income, income effects would range from 7 billion loss to 27.9 billion loss. And accommodation and restaurants are the top that would be most affected. Note that about 1/3 of the workers in Boracay are in the accommodation and food and beverage industry. So these are the people that would be mostly affected. And then what did we do next? All right. So, okay, this first. So I'm running out of time, but what we did next is we moved on from the input-output analysis to a computable general equilibrium analysis. The difference is that we want to look at the impact in terms of prices. So if you close Boracay, the assumption is that there would be a loss in supply of tourist characteristic products. So there would be a shift in your supply curve upward, driving prices upward. So if there's a more, in terms of the supply of, if the prices in terms of tourist products is higher, so then the consumption, what would be the impact in terms of consumption, in terms of export of services, etc., etc. So what did we do? We tried to model that closure using a CGE model, and we found out that other sectors, so not just the tourism sectors, and transport and travel and accommodation, but also agriculture, industry, and services would also be affected, but very slightly. The Boracay closure, by reducing the supply of tourist characteristic products, increases the supply of these products, as I mentioned earlier. Then we would see higher prices in the supply price of and this would reduce the consumption of households. Households would thereby reduce their consumption by this much. And then it would also impact our exports. Higher supply prices would also reduce the consumption of tourists as measured by the reduction in exports, resulting in the overall reduction in output. Okay. So after all those numbers, let me just try to put them into words. What we found is that transportation and tourism would be adversely affected the most, although some adverse effects would also be felt by agriculture and manufacturing sectors. We also found that accommodation and restaurants are the top industries that would lose the most, and these two would actually employ 1/3 of Boracay's workers. The impact of the closure will be borne mostly by the tourism industry, as we actually think. So ways forward. So just the last slide. So just for the ways forward, while the economic value of Boracay can mostly be seen in the revenue generated from tourism, and thus the economic value of the closure is equated to the potential loss of revenues from various streams, as suggested in the previous section, the closure will still have its direct and indirect effects to the people living in Boracay and the entire municipality of Malay. So ways forward, we actually suggest these further improvements. There's a need to increase mangrove cover, restore coral reefs, protect and rehabilitate seagrass beds. We need to also carry out effective zoning, relocate informal settlers, and regulate fisheries and water sports, and also identify the Boracay Island's carrying capacity and determine if new firms will potentially overload its carrying capacity. As in any calamity, the ecological crisis in the island will seriously affect living conditions of the poor as well as the non-poor with low incomes. So the study is also available online if you can visit the PIDS website here. So if you want further details, especially in terms of the assumptions and the analysis, and I would be looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
Right. Good morning. Yes. And first, I'd like to thank Alan for inviting me. Kinulit-kulit niya ako. He actually asked me several times to attend, and I've worked with him for a long time. I don't want to say how long that we have been working together, because that will age us. But yeah, so I'm happy to see him again, and this time we're wearing different hats. Okay. Right. So I've been asked to. So I think I followed the correct presentation because it was on Boracay. So now my presentation is on the role of the private sector in conservation of resources. So perhaps some of the next steps might also be gleaned from this presentation. But before I start, I would like to show some videos. Okay.
Sa mga corals nangingitlog.
Ay, sayang Nikita. There. Okay. Tatlong sets to. Okay.
Mga bagong isda ay nabubuhay at naninirahan hanggang ganap na lumakas. Sa malinis na karagatan sila ay lalaki. Bagong isda ay may mga tanim sa tamang panahon. Mga isdang aabot sa ating palengke upang tayo ay may isda sa ating kapagkainan. Kung mga oras ay nasisira dahil sa ating mga gawain, paano na ang buhay nila? Paano na ang isdang pagkain natin? Kung wala yun, wala ito.
Okay, next.
Bawat uri ng buhay ay mahalaga para sa isa't isa. Maaaring isipin na ang isang uri ng ibon ay pwedeng wala sa likas na tirahan nito. Subalit, kung wala ang ibon ito, nagkakaroon ang peste kinakain ito. Peste yung pagkain mga ipalay. Lubos ng sumistika sa taliman. Pagkadugi sa hanabuhay ng magsasakay. Dudot din ay nakularan ng bigas sa mga palengke. Kaya kung wala ang ibon ito, paano na ang kabuhayan nila? Paano na ang bigas natin? Kung wala yun, wala ito.
Okay, last.
May mga bundok na malawak at lagubatan. Natirahan ng maraming uri ng hayop dahil sa likas na ganda. Magandang tanawin at pasyalan nito. Nagkakaroon ng hanapbuhay at mamamayang nakatira sa paligid nito. Kainan, tindahan, tirahan, at kung ano-ano pang mga negosyo. Mahalaga na manatiling maayos ang bundok at lagubatan. Kung ito ay masira at mawalan ng likas na ganda, paano na ang kanilang kabuhayan? Paano na ang ating pasyalan? Kung wala yun, wala nito.
Okay, so these were a set of videos that was our project before when I was still with the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, and then just to contextualize, what does what is yun in the video. Kung wala yun, wala nito. Yun is the biodiversity, if you notice. And what is biodiversity? Okay. Ito, this is the technical definition of biodiversity. The variability among living organisms, in short, the diversity of species, ecosystems, and even genetic resources are part of our biodiversity. Okay. So kung wala yun, if there's no biodiversity, wala nito. Okay. The others that you've seen, food, the last video showed tourism will be affected. So the diversity includes species, between species, and of ecosystems. So this is the technical definition under the Convention on Biological Diversity. Okay. Okay, so why is it important? So I've a lot of examples from the Philippines, although I'm from the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity now. I used to be with the Environment Department of the Philippines, so bear with me. I'll be providing more examples from the Philippines. Okay, so why is it important for the Philippines? 59% of mammals that are found in the Philippines are found here, nowhere else in the world. 45% of our birds are unique. 77% of reptiles are found here in the Philippines, nowhere else in the world, including the Crocodylus mindorensis. Okay. Birds include the Philippine eagle. And 81% of amphibians. We're the amphibian heaven. You know, we have a lot of frogs that are found in our islands. And 60% of our plants are found only in the Philippines, nowhere else in the world. The photo, in fact, if you see, that's a rafflesia. For those of you who are familiar, this rafflesia is actually the icon of Sabah. But in fact, in Sabah, you only can find 6 to 7 species of rafflesia. In the Philippines, we have 12 species of rafflesia. So, and as I speak, more species are still being discovered. As of 1987, 120 species more of animals have been found in the Philippines, have been discovered, and 170 species of plants. Our ecosystems are also rich. We have 12 forest formations. So when I say forest formations, we don't only have the, commonly your idea of forest is just the dipterocarp forest where you have the hardwood, large forest like in Sierra Madre. But there are unique forests in Boracay, for example. There's a limestone forest. So that's another type of forest. Different species of plants grow in different types of forest. And our marine areas are also rich. Okay, so this is why it's important. We're a magnet for ecotourism because of this special biodiversity that we have. Okay, 5 out of the 7 turtles are found in the Philippines. Okay, they nest in our areas. The pawikan, marine turtle. Okay. So the point is, this biodiversity have not been thoroughly taken into account when we plan our tourism activities. And for a country such as the Philippines, where our main tourism attraction is our natural resources, I'm wondering why it hasn't been taken into account that much, no? And so we are now working on mainstreaming biodiversity into different industries, into the development sector. This is one of the thrusts now of our agency, the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity. So the videos that you found that I showed you earlier, kung wala yan, wala yun, wala nito, the technical interpretation of that is mainstreaming biodiversity. It is to internalize the goals of biodiversity conservation and sustainable use of biological diversity. This is the definition adopted as of now by our sector. This is a definition of the Global Environment Facility. Okay. But before we are able to appreciate, or we are able to mainstream biodiversity, the first step is to build a good business case. Okay. Taking into account biodiversity in your project or business planning and implementation must make good business sense. Right. And of course, as we are talking about different industries, different sectors in development, but especially why tourism? We want to focus on the tourism industry. There are several reasons. No? As mentioned earlier by Vice President Inigo, tourism is one of the world's fastest growing industries. Okay. But it's also a source of increasing stress on fragile ecosystems. The Philippines, I mentioned, we have fragile ecosystems, several ecosystems, and it's the same areas where we want, these are the same areas that we want to promote tourism. Environmental impacts are immense. And concentrates on vulnerable and fragile and cultural areas, important environment areas. So it's the same areas. We are actually, if you map out our protected areas and our tourism development areas, you will see that more than 200 of the tourism development areas are also our protected areas. So the challenge is to ensure that tourism is developed in harmony with environmental considerations. So this is a challenge that is posed to the private sector, okay, and to all of us, the market. Okay, so according to a common friend of mine and Alan, who is now based in Australia, she has a Philippine tourism book. She said, this is Dr. Sinha, tourism is a potential tool for improving people's standard of living through better infrastructure development, increased employment, additional household income, tax revenue, and benefits of tourism can be made permanent. Okay, so it just says that we all know what the benefits of tourism is, but we want to make it more sustainable. We want to make it more permanent. You know, if you talk about sustainability, then we need to develop strategies that are consistent with the sustainable tourism and biodiversity conservation. Okay. So in other words, tourism and biodiversity should be mutually supportive, especially, as I mentioned, because of our situation. You know, most of our tourism areas are nature areas as well. Okay. The ASEAN Center for Biodiversity recently conducted a workshop last year, among the ASEAN member states. And these are some of the outcomes of that tourism workshop. Of course, nature-based tourism, which we all know, this is already, of course, everybody knows that when you talk about tourism, nature-based tourism, you rely on the diversity that we have, biodiversity of species and ecosystems. Okay. And well, there's a study that visits Visits to our natural areas are estimated to account for 50% of all leisure travels. But for the ASEAN, it should be more. It's not just 50%. It could be more than that, because we are, as I mentioned, our attractions are mostly nature-based. And there are pathways for ensuring the long-term sustainability of tourism while ensuring that it positively contributes to biodiversity, or at least not affect it negatively. Okay. And we don't want to be prescriptive as well, because there is no single approach to mainstreaming biodiversity considerations. It will depend on the area where you want to develop your tourism activity, and then you need to implement responsible business practices and encourage the adoption of practices for sustainable green and blue infrastructure. So this was a result of the of the workshop. So at the ASEAN level, we are in mostly the same situation. Okay, okay. This just shows the trend in ASEAN. So we are increasing, although there are a bit of fluctuations, the trend is still increasing for travelers, no, within ASEAN. Okay, so there are guidelines on biodiversity in tourism development that was developed, and in 2014 at the Conference of the Parties of the Convention on Biological Diversity, it also provided some recommendations for businesses to analyze the impact of biodiversity of business decisions, reporting framework considerations, and enhance the capacity of senior level of management and line staff, and integrate biodiversity considerations into procurement policies. So these were recommendations from the conference. Also, now for us to be able to build a good case, so I go back to my slide. No, build a good case for that biodiversity is good for business. First, we need to know what we have. No? We talked about research earlier. No? Some of the researches that we must invest in at the outset are what we have in our ecotourism areas. So we need to baseline. Know what species are in the area. May point. All right. So these two, oops. Okay. These two here are not dating. They're actually counting bats. Okay. So they're looking at the horizon. This is in Boracay. So there's a bat count regularly to determine the effect of development on bats. And this is a survey of the soil, the land. This is in Liguasan Marsh. Okay. So they want to find out what the type of soil is in the area. Okay. Okay. So I talked about kanina, the previous speaker talked about Boracay. I was just speaking to Alan here that we have been talking about this issue for a long time. It's not just recently, but we already know that Boracay has subterranean caves, and this assessment should have been taken into account, considered. So before you go invest, it's important that you know where the caves are. Are you going to build your facility on top of the cave? What are the geohazardous areas that should be avoided? Wetlands. You need to know if you are going to build on top of a wetland, that should be considered, because that can cause flooding. You will be blocking the waterways. And then it's important as well to know the species of birds that you have. This Philippine eagle. These are the unique species of birds that the Philippines has. This is just in Pampanga. This one. Okay. Bee-eaters, we have colorful birds. And if you know what your birds are, then you can actually promote birding. No? It's difficult to promote birding if you don't know what species of birds you have in your area, what you need to focus on. So in fact, if you have a bird, based on the study of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, that the total revenue from birding in the U.S. is 107 billion per year, and we have as much unique species of birds here than comparably than the U.S. Okay, so number one was on baselining. Know your species, know your ecosystems. Invest on that. Invest on these studies. Second, you need to formulate your plans. Okay, based on the information that you have gathered from your baselining, from your assessment, you need to form a plan. It should be consistent with local priorities. So in here, we have a consultation with the local government, with the communities, to find out, how we can also be consistent with their plans. No? Okay. And this is an example that I can present where we coordinated the mayor of Bangi wanted to develop this small patch of forest on top of a hill in the middle of the municipality in Bangi. And to plan, we were able to assess the area first. We went there, we looked at some of the plants. So this is a banayoyo, it's a medicinal plant, indigenous to the Philippines and Asia. This is a native fern, it's a Philippine fern. And then this is a tetrastigma plant. The tetrastigma vine is actually an indication, it's a host plant for the Rafflesia. So these are very... So based on that, we capitalized on forest corridors, emphasized native trees. So the plan was for meditation yoga hill. No? This is another example. This is in somewhere. This is a septic tank. The planning of this septic tank, well, it was beside a hole, a sinkhole. So apparently it was not planned so well because it was beside a sinkhole, and in fact the sinkhole was being used as a septic tank. And so of course there's seepage in the marine area. Okay. And this is in Apo Reef. This is group of sharks. Okay. All right, so if you know what you have and you plan for it, now you can, yeah, it swims, if you can move the... So these are baby sharks. So if you know where what are the attractions are, you know how to protect it, and you can set it aside for protection or for limited. Yeah, okay. Yan. So baby shark. Kakanta na eh. Yeah. So okay. Right. So it's also important. We talked about, Boracay talked about planting mangroves. It's important that we plant the right species. Okay. So you can plan where to, if you plan your mangrove area, you know where to put your walks. It can be as fancy as this, or it can be no walk at all. Peatlands, special forest. This is in Liguasan Marsh. Okay. You need to know if you have a peatland in your area. Okay, so that you can build the proper structure. Sustainable supply chain. The private companies are key players in the tourism sectors. Okay. So if there's sustainable practice, you have a well-functioning, healthy environment and stable economy. And of course, it goes back to the private sector as profit, especially now, no, because of especially now because the mindset of our tourists is now evolving. You know, they are looking for more green tourism activities. Green building designs should be taken into account, and sourcing community-based, biodiversity-based, environment-friendly products. Okay. This is a mangrove that grows at the seafront, and it's important that you plant the right mangroves so that you are able to defend yourself from sea level rise. And this is a community that uses the products from the mangroves. Okay, so they use the mangrove roots for chips and cookies, and they use the mangrove seeds for mangrove syrup. This is in Bali, no? So if you patronize these kinds of products, you encourage the communities to protect the mangroves as well. So that means you don't have to spend a lot for planting the mangroves because you're partnering with the communities who are already protecting the mangroves, but you support this kind of activities. And then, of course, capacity building and communication. The ASEAN supports such activities, and we can partner with the private sector as well. Initially, we are providing services to government, but we can work with the private sector for these cross visits and exchanges. Okay, communication, social media is very important. Okay, this is a project site, Project Alagalaan, and it's like a barometer for us to see what is the pulse of the tourist. No? Okay, so it reports irresponsible travel and unsustainable tourism. So, okay, and there's one example is actually their call for tour operators and guides as are pivotal to sustainable tourism. So clearly there's a link. Share best practices through formal and informal fora. Communicate sustainability expectations. Okay. So no feeding of marine turtles. No, this is a sorry. Okay. Yeah. All right, so before you embark on such activities, protect Tubatari, for example, you dive into Bataha and show that you need to be able to walk your talk and really believe that biodiversity is good for your business. Okay, thank you.
I'd like to invite Dr. Kimba and Dr. Lim to join me here rather on stage for our 15-minute open forum. We have so much to learn. Actually, Dr. Lim just spoke about the Philippine experience, just handling ASEAN Center for Biodiversity. So we have actually more to learn also from other ASEAN practices. No? So I'll just pose one question to our two panelists, and then I'll invite members from the audience to join me in, of course, asking also questions to Dr. Kimba and Dr. Lim. So let's talk about the way forward, okay? And you mentioned, Dr. Lim and also Dr. Kimba, some of the things that we can do, right, in order to avoid this tragedy of the commons in more of our island destinations and other tourism destinations. So can you identify specific practices where private sector can take more proactive role in ensuring sustainability? So examples of, let's say, partnerships, not just in the Philippines, but maybe also in ASEAN.
Well, actually, I already mentioned partnership with for the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity, we provide capacity building programs, experiential learning programs, and this is something that we right now we're just working with the governments, but we are welcome to work with the private sector for these experiential learning programs, and then also for identifying. For baselining as well, we can also provide initiatives for assessment of certain areas that have potential for tourism activities, and partnership with the communities, which I already mentioned. We need to identify what are the communities that are also adopting a sustainable practice in coming and livelihoods. And we can support these communities so that we can promote sustainable livelihoods that are already protecting the biodiversity in areas within and adjacent to your ecotourism sites.
So, Dr. Gimba, does that mean that given your recommendation to establish, let's say, carrying capacity in Boracay, can we still pursue, let's say, more aggressive growth or development in other destinations, or do we really need to really do all these carrying capacity studies for all destinations? Because as you said, that would incur or lead to some economic and social costs for those that are already investing in tourism, particularly in the part of the private sector and the communities.
I think it's really important that we understand the carrying capacity of all these areas, and we have learned from the experience of Boracay that we cannot just really keep on receiving tourists without regard to how much the island can accommodate at a given period in time. And we have learned in a very difficult manner that we should really limit and even not even just limit the number of people arriving, but also the types of activities that are being conducted or that are being conducted and held within the beachfront or near the beachfront and even near the other areas. So, and I think this idea of understanding the carrying capacity of all our tourism or areas should also be conducted also in all other tourism areas, not just in Boracay, because we have also seen in other areas, for example, in northern Luzon, that the influx of so many people at a given period in time is actually it's good for the industry and good for consumption because there's a lot of people buying things, but it's also pushing too much demand on the natural resources of that area. Water becomes scarce. There's some type of inflation because of scarcity in all other products and goods. So there's really a need to understand not just the carrying capacity also, but maybe even the flow of tourists. Where do they usually go at certain periods in time, and so we can actually manage and even promote areas that are not receiving as many tourists.
So in both your recommendations on baselining, right, conduct of assessments, and then identifying, let's say, tourism flows, then we have actually a common agenda that could be pursued also together with our partner universities and research institutions and government. And that is really the conduct of research, but at the core of really good research is the data, the right data, right? And that not just the right data, but the relevant data, meaning for the data to be really shared also on time so that we could generate more results from it. Okay. Now I'd like to invite members of our audience, if you have any questions addressed to either Dr. Lim or to Dr. Kimba, please raise your hand and then state your name and your organizational affiliation and identify the resource person or panelist to whom you're addressing your question to. We have so many young people in the room, so I'm sure you're all curious to know some answers related to sustainability. Yes, any volunteers? Yes.
Thank you, Twinkle. I'm with the American Chamber of Commerce. I travel a lot around Southeast Asia, and I'm just wondering if you might be able to cite some very, very good examples from other countries, because Thailand is expected to get 40 million tourists this year. I was down in Bali for a wedding a few months ago, and they get actually more tourists, international tourists, than they have people living on that island. So this challenge is faced by many destinations in Southeast Asia. So I was wondering if you can cite some examples of those that are handling this without having to actually close down the facilities, and which is, I think, Boracay. I didn't have the second question in answer to. Has this been successful? And will you recommend that, is it necessary to do it in other areas that are similarly challenged in the Philippines?
First example, the one that I presented earlier, the community that is producing the fruits, the products from the mangrove, this is in Bali. So they are in some areas, some resorts are already patronizing products from the communities that are protecting the mangrove areas. And they gather the fruits sustainably because they don't cut the mangroves. I think they've learned a lot from the experience in Banda Aceh, where a lot of the areas that were protected by mangroves were the ones that survived the tsunami. So that's one example that I saw. For the closure, there are actually several resorts now in Southeast Asia that have also closed down. Like after Boracay, Thailand also closed down the beach. The beach, I don't recall, but this was in the film of Leonardo DiCaprio. So they also followed the same route. But when you close down, it's already too late. I think what the positive thing that came out from the Boracay closure was that the other resorts have started to come up with their own environmental program and sustainability program before the Department of Environment can even close them down. In Siargao, for example, during the time of the closure, the mayor of Siargao, who's an advocate for sustainable development, was already talking about certain measures to make sure that the tourism there is sustainable. Also, El Nido started to come up with some measures as well to prevent a drastic measure such as closure.
Because we want evidence-based answers. So, to be honest, I don't have an evidence to say whether the closure is successful or not. Because the study is ex ante, so we really just have models to say what's going to happen if we close. But we haven't really verified, now that we've seen that it was closed and it was opened again, we haven't really seen what's the impact. As I've shown in the slide, there are poor and non-poor people in Malay, and there are also poor and non-poor people in Boracay, and they would be affected by some of the changes now that some activities are not allowed near the beach, or there's a limitation in the number of tourists and even in the number of establishments near the beach. So who would be benefiting and who wouldn't be, who would be bearing the cost of these changes? Those are the things that maybe would have to be analyzed further in maybe another study, or before we can really say that there's a benefit or that the closure is successful. If we're going to look at it just from pictures and just from anecdotal evidence, we see that perhaps yes, there's big improvement in terms of how the beachfront looks now and in terms of the limitations in the activities, but we actually have to dig deeper in terms of the impact in terms of the income of those who are living in the area, in terms also of the types of establishments and businesses that were affected there. So
yeah,
right now I don't have an answer.
Okay. Yeah, just to add, my view is the impacts that were actually shown as impacts of closure are actually impacts of unsustainable management of the island. So what the closure did was just to accelerate what would have been an impact in so many years' time. Because when we close down, then you see this immediate loss of jobs or immediate decline in the revenue of certain industries. This just accelerated because of the closure. But if we didn't close it because of unsustainable management of the island, eventually this would have been the effect anyway.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kimba and Dr. Lim. But related to that, we were just talking about Boracay and then possibilities maybe of closure of other destinations, which, as pointed out, we still don't have really the evidence to really pursue that particular track. But we haven't really talked about, let's say, dispersal. Because as pointed out earlier in some of the photos, it could be a matter of perspective that one area is really like overcrowded or there's over-tourism. But within the environs of an area, within the environs of the island, there could be other areas where we could actually develop tourism and really move, and disperse the benefits towards those areas through tourism circuits maybe. So are there examples happening, let's say, in ASEAN or in some of the studies that you may have encountered in the process of looking at the socioeconomic consequences of Boracay Island closure that could be used as models for these types of dispersal so that we really avoid, another maybe closure to happen?
Well, it's hard to provide specific examples with actual results because that we would be needing a study for that. But again, using Boracay as an example, when I was still with the Department of Environment and DNR, we already saw. And Alan and I have been talking about diversification for a long time. We need to diversify activities. Like, the beachfront may not just be the attraction that you have, and you also have, as I mentioned, you have caves, you have birding, you have a lot of birds as well in Boracay, where other activities can also be promoted. And then also there are communities there. There's an indigenous community as well in Boracay, and they have started small, the cottage industry, which could have been promoted as well. So these are and then in Boracay, there are areas that can be used for diving, but then there are areas that can be for beach. So yeah, so this in just one island in the Philippines, can you imagine how many activities can be undertaken if we did a proper study? So it's in the same way, other islands in the Philippines can also achieve the same, diversification of and dispersal of tourists.
Actually, we don't really yet have an understanding of how people value, for instance, a park or a beach or going to climbing a mountain versus going to the beach. So because if we have that valuation, then we would know that certain groups would actually value maybe going to beaches, going to parks, then that would maybe allow us to plan that we should promote going to the beach maybe during summer, or so having an understanding of the behavior of people and how much they value certain types of activities, then that would also maybe provide evidence on how we can do policy for dispersion.
Thank you. And also maybe find out how we can link the other areas of Malay Municipality and other areas of the province of Aklan to Boracay as the core attraction for a particular activity or sets of activities. Okay, so are there other questions from our partners? Yes, please.
Good morning, I'm Violet from Nature Awareness Club, and what we do is corporate social responsibility through sustainable tourism. My question for the panels, can you suggest how we bring these ideas? You have excellent ideas, excellent practices to the tour operators, suppliers, and agency because we have these ideas, but when we do the actual things, just a suggestion lang po. When we do the actual thing, it's the presentation. What's happening is way different. Some are like irresponsible tourism, coming from even the operators pa lang. And of course, they're not giving good examples already to the tourists. So can you suggest good practices for the owners of travel agencies and operators?
Yeah. Well, this is actually, this exercise is already a brilliant idea for sharing information. So I congratulate the organizers. And then, of course, with social media, I did mention social media. The page that I made as an example is also a way for informing tourist operators what the market likes, what is the emerging trend in the market as well. And then for tourism operators, you need to start talking to your suppliers as well. You need to involve the entire supply chain. It's not just the operators, but the food, the beverage, the accommodations, and all of them must be at the same page. When talking about sustainability, and so this will take some time, but we are working on it. I'm happy that we have this forum that we can talk about it. Alan and Raja Tours is already talking about potential partnerships with the center and with the academe. So these are all opportunities that we can find. Partnership with the communities as well, but it's so hard to be, as I mentioned, to be very prescriptive, because it will eventually depend on where you want, what areas you would like to develop or to promote for your ecotourism or your sustainable tourism activity.
Maybe I just have 4 points. So first, I think really important is awareness. And what awareness in terms of the value of biodiversity and in terms of sustainable environment. So it's important that we teach not only those who are in tertiary education, but also elementary. So we incorporate these understanding in the basic education. But also it's important that we leverage the use of ICT, as Ma'am has already mentioned, Facebook, Twitter, all these things. We spread the word that it's important, that we value, and we just use those services that are promoting environmental sustainability. And also, finally, it's also important that, as also Ma'am has mentioned, we, especially for those who are in the upper tier of the supply chain, those who are who have a number of suppliers that are coming to them, it's important that you actually impose to your suppliers the use of environmental sustainable processes and techniques. And because this is how, for example, a big manufacturing company like Toyota can actually improve the standards of all its suppliers. They tell them, you follow our standards, otherwise we won't get any supplies from you or any parts from you. So that's also the same way here. If you are a big supplier or if you are a big tour operator, impose on your suppliers these standards. It will be hard because, and as Toyota has learned, they really need to handhold some of their suppliers in order to meet certain standards. But in the end, there's actually a lot of development happening by just imposing standards and actually assisting your suppliers to meet those standards.
Okay, thank you very much. So it's really a culture of promoting what we call due diligence or responsible business conduct for those who are interested on how you can actually move outside of your own business environment and also relate to how you impact on the society, the people, environment outside of your companies. The OECD has given very good guidelines on due diligence up to the enterprise level. Okay, so if there are no more questions, I think we can, yes, we have one question from a student. Yes, please approach one of our staff.
Hello, good morning. I'm Leonard Papa from De La Salle Araneta University. We got an interest to the capacity building efforts. The question is, how can students like us be able to participate to the capacity building efforts?
I'm very happy to inform you that the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity also has an ASEAN Youth for Biodiversity program. So this is an opportunity for youth to be engaged in activities such as our sustainable mainstreaming biodiversity into the tourism sector. So if you want to know more about it, I have my colleagues from the ASEAN Center who are here who can give you some information on how you can be involved in our activities in the ASEAN.
Thank you. Thank you, po.
Okay. All right. So we now conclude our first half of the Travel Talk session. I'd like to thank, on behalf of the Knowledge Center of Raja Travel Corporation, Dr. Francis Mark Kimba and Dr. Teresa Mundita Lim for generously sharing their time with us this morning. So thank you. We now proceed to the second half of our travel talk. A tale of two destinations, a tale of two initiatives. That is what the second half is all about. Sustainable tourism is not just about environmental conservation and preservation. It's also about how we manage our cultural assets. Earlier, our two distinguished speakers, Dr. Lim and Dr. Kimba, explored the idea of product diversification, of dispersal, and one of the ways by which we can actually achieve that is through the sustainable management of our cultural assets. And to give us actually how they're able to do that in two respective destinations, namely Bohol and Intramuros, are two lawyers. So the first is Attorney Lucas Nunag, who is the owner of Amarela Resort, a boutique resort in Panglao Island, in the province of Bohol. Attorney Nunag's resort actually is a multi-awarded resort in the ASEAN. It's an ASEAN Green Resort. And he has actually participated in a number of initiatives towards greening not just of his facility, but also of the province of Bohol. And another tale is that of Intramuros, to be shared with us by Attorney Giler Asido, who is the current administrator of the Intramuros administration. So let's all welcome Attorney Lucas Nunag and Attorney Giler Asido.
Good morning, fellow workers and students in responsible tourism. You will notice that the next two speakers are lawyers, like Ms. Twinkle mentioned. We are friends. We used to work for the TIAZA together. So you see, there are better and more sustainable uses for lawyers. My topic today is about the private sector initiatives towards sustainable tourism. I will not talk about any destination or of the Philippines as a tourism destination, but about one particular destination, one that is close to my heart, my homeland, Bohol. So, by way of outline, first I will be sharing with you the experiences of Bohol in tourism development. We do not claim to be a best practice destination, but we're trying to do our best. And along the way, you may learn something from what we will be sharing. And as they say, it is good to learn from your mistakes, but better still to learn from the mistakes of others. Bohol has a declared tourism direction, and we will talk about that later, and how this direction is being carried out is by way of collaboration of many stakeholders. And more particularly, we will be talking about the specific initiatives of the private sector in sustainable tourism. And there are many game-changing developments that are happening right now in Bohol. And there are also very formidable challenges that we are facing. So let's proceed. It's good that we pick Bohol because it is very much similar to many other rising tourism destinations. We are nature-based in terms of attraction, and of course a big plus is heritage and culture. There's also a rapid increase in tourist arrivals, especially after Boracay closed. Last year, we did close to 1.5 million tourists, including local tourists. And of course, we have sustainability issues, which came into closer focus after Boracay was closed. We have a tourism vision which was crafted about 8 years back. And also, there's even a law which declares Bohol as an eco-cultural tourist zone. And we have our logo, which also expresses our tourism policy. Tourism vision, you will see that sustainability is embedded in this vision. So we talk about environmental, cultural, and economic sustainability, as well as meeting global tourism standards to remain competitive. And then there's a Republic Act that was crafted in 2007, which also expresses the direction that Bohol wants to take, which is sustainability in terms of natural and cultural heritage, as well as in the economic aspect. Sustainability is, as I said, embedded in the tourism direction of Bohol. We even have this logo. Dr. Rodolfo helped us craft this logo together with CNN after the earthquake of 2013. So it also expresses the natural assets of Bohol, particularly the Chocolate Hills and the Tarsier and the easy, relaxed lines of our type of tourism. But how good are these images and these words if we don't put this in action? So how are we doing this? To be sustainable, well, first let's define what is sustainability. It is the type of development that meets the goals of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. To move forward in this sustainability direction, Bohol works through the various sectors involved in tourism, particularly the government and the private sector. It's a good, healthy partnership because the government lets the private sector undertake the business, and it provides the enabling environment like the infrastructure, peace and order, the ease in doing business. And we have been fortunate that our provincial administration or the provincial government has always been pro-tourism, and they listen to the private sector regardless of their party affiliations. And we have a very vocal and participative private sector. And of course, we have been enjoying the assistance of development partners like the USAID, JICA, OSTAID, SIDA of Canada, COICA of Korea, and then the ZZR of Germany and other development partners working with private sector and government in sustainability efforts. The private sector and the government collaborate mainly through the Provincial Tourism Council, which consists of the key stakeholders from government and private sector. For private sector, we have the accommodation, tour operators, the tour guides, even the Chamber of Commerce, and the various departments in the provincial government that are involved in tourism. It basically is a recommendatory and a policy advisor to the provincial government. Of course, it's also the mouthpiece of the tourism industry in the province. There are efforts of individual resorts as well as the Association of Hotels and Resorts towards responsible tourism. And let me just illustrate by way of one resort. Dr. Rodolfo already mentioned a resort which we operate. It's a 13-year-old resort which highlights Bohol heritage, arts, and culture, and was twice in a row an ASEAN Green Resort awardee, and very recently was the recipient of ANAHAO Sustainable Tourism Certification Level 4, which is the highest awarded to any resort in the Philippines. There were three of us who were given the Level 4 certification, one in Bohol and two in Palawan. Let's just go through very quickly with our green practices, mainly energy efficiency. We have solar panels for our water heating, energy efficient public areas, use of LED lights, among other initiatives. Water conservation, we recycle our wastewater, we have rain collection systems, and then we also we minimize the use of concrete surfaces so that the rainwater will go back to the water table. Waste management, solid, we segregate our waste at source. We have composting and fertilizer from the composting we use in our herb and vegetable garden. We even have a vermiculture project. And for liquid waste, we have a reed bed system which has served us well, especially after the EMB of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources became very strict with the enforcement of their effluent standards. So with the use of a biological wastewater treatment facility, we have been consistently able to pass the very stringent EMB standards. We have had this reed bed system from the start. This was introduced by way of the USAID assistance. And we have to be good to our community, so we are in close coordination with our barangay in terms of greening and cleaning. And we're very proud to have full-scale art gallery at our resort premises featuring Bohol art and artifacts, the best of Bohol art. And we always share our green initiatives with our fellow stakeholders in the community, with other resorts, with local governments, as well as with academia. We have an association of hotels and Bohol. We have the Bohol Association of Hotels, Resorts, and Restaurants in Bohol. And we have undertaken, as a group, green initiatives. For example, we have had a memorandum of agreement with the provincial government where we gathered the seeds from our operations, like mango seeds and papaya seeds and give it to the provincial agriculturist. And then he plants this, and with the planting materials, he spreads this out to the farmers or gives them back to the resort owners. In exchange, he provides technical assistance for the resorts who would like to have their own gardens. And we have an Adapt a Barangay project by way of beautification. Flower arrangement looks very, very trivial, but actually this is a good representation of sustainability because we avoid using plastic flowers. They're ugly in the first place. Secondly, they're non-biodegradable. And you can use, we trained our resort owners to look for decoration from their yard, from twigs and leaves and flowers that they found, that they will find in their own yards. And we have, in terms of sustainability in quality service, we have helped train the K-12 senior high students, and also in training pollution control officers. And we have been sharing whatever material we have on the ASEAN Green standards, as well as the Anahaw standards with the other resort members. Recent developments, we have a new airport, better seaport. This is an international airport. We have improved connectivity with neighboring islands like Camiguin, Siquijor, and on Monday we have an inaugural flight from Bohol to El Nido. So there's much more interaction and interconnection among the islands. Of course, recent development, Boracay closed. I would like to mention to the gentleman from the AmCham that insofar as from our perspective, the closure of Boracay was very much positive. Well, not only in terms of arrivals, we used to have 40, we were happy with 40 to 50% occupancy. When Boracay closed, it became 80 to 90%. But that's the fleeting side of the benefit. I think the more far-reaching benefit is that we became much more aware of sustainability. We started to beg the DNR for a carrying capacity study, and also the DNR woke up in terms of its function to monitor and train and really compel the stakeholders to follow environmental standards. And there are new facilities being constructed in the accommodation sector. Challenges. We expect a dramatic increase in tourist arrivals. Like I said, we had 1.5 million visitors in 2018. 2019 will be a much higher figure. And like I said, environmental carrying capacity, including waste management and easement issues, especially after Boracay, has become much more prominent. Carrying capacity, I think, is a national issue, and the DOT, the DNR, and perhaps the DILG should form some kind of convergence so that before we promote and develop resorts or resort destinations, we should have first carrying capacity studies so we know how far we can go and what markets to target. And how to make another challenge is how to make the industry more inclusive. How do we let the farmers, the fishermen enjoy the benefits of tourism. So we are already discussing planting now fruit trees and other crops which will feed the tourists 5 years from now. We have a neighbor, our resort is only 30 rooms. We have a next door neighbor that is going to develop for its first phase 1,200 rooms. Their eventual target is 4,000 rooms. So let's think how to feed. What will be the buffet lineup for that resort 5 years from now when it opens? Strain on our resources, including energy, food supply. Like I said, we have to think about how to source our food supply, our supply chains to be efficient. We still import most of our high-value vegetables and herbs and fruits from Mindanao, and you could grow them in Bohol, and the carbon footprint will be much less. Energy, there was an issue about brownouts, blackouts, to be more precise. There was talk about, in fact, there was already serious discussion about bringing in a coal-powered plant in Bohol. The private sector raised a big howl, organized themselves together with civic organizations, including the church, and we came up with a manifesto, and we were able to convince the authorities that Bohol is not for coal. So it's no to coal. There's already a provincial board resolution saying no to coal, thanks to the private sector. We are also facing great social, cultural, and including health costs, actually. There's also the threat of casinos coming in. We have already passed a manifesto initiated by the private sector saying no to casinos because Bohol has more than enough attractions to bring in the tourists. We don't need casinos to change the culture of the Boholanos, their cherished traditions that they have nurtured through the centuries. So we're hoping that PAGCOR will listen and the higher authorities will also listen. On the other cultural cost, we are afraid that with so many outside influences coming in, there might be a degradation to our cultural and heritage treasures. So the cultural workers in Bohol, together with the academe, with the aid of the USAID and some other development partners and the NCCA particularly, have been undertaking cultural mappings in various areas. We have also been the beneficiary of training sessions from the NCCA and other national agencies in terms of training in performances as well as the visual arts. And we have already been initiating discussions with the Tourism Knowledge Center about coming up with a better Visita Iglesia or church pilgrimage tour in Bohol, considering that most of the churches which were damaged during the earthquake have been restored or are in the process of restoration. So there is a richer story to tell that many tourists, I'm sure, would like to listen to. So, maraming salamat po.
Morning, everyone. My area of discussion will be for today will be something that is close to everyone in here inside this hall right now. It's basically where we are working, and many of you are also studying right now. So we are very privileged to be in this special space right now, which is a national cultural treasure, Intramuros. So for the past 2 years, almost 2 years that we've been here, the focus right now is to give this new narrative to what everyone has referred to as the walled city of Manila and the old city of Manila. So for purposes of the discussion for this morning, I will be following this outline. First, I would like to cover basically the fact that everyone here, or every one of us, has his own memory of what Intramuros should be. And I would like always to start the presentation with a quote from our national artist for literature, Nick Joaquin, who said that everyone basically has his own memory of what Intramuros should be. And that is what he referred to as the different layers of Intramuros. So basically, every Filipino perhaps has visited Intramuros once or twice in his lifetime, basically when he did the usual trip when he or she was a student. And for us right now here, we attended something as a conference, and for many of you here, you are all studying inside Intramuros. So, sorry, let me just go back to So, Intramuros is basically that space, a national cultural treasure space that is waiting to be discovered always. And we all know the location is the prime city, it is in the prime space of Manila. And the value basically of the fact of Intramuros is that it used to be the political, administrative, religious capital of the country. Everything started inside the walled city. And to some extent, globalization actually started as well inside the walled city with the Manila-Acapulco trade. Now, what we wanted to do basically is to give this new narrative of the more than 400 years history of Intramuros, to give new narrative to the new generation. So, last year, Intramuros was declared as a national cultural treasure. And as a national cultural treasure, our office is basically mandated to ensure its conservation. And we are an attached agency of the Department of Tourism, but alongside with that mandate of conservation, we are also required to do the tourism aspect or the tourism development of the space. So you're all familiar already what many of you here are students, so I'm sure you've been around the walled city and are very familiar with all of the spaces inside. If you look at it, there's our areas as well. The walled city spans basically 64 kilometers, and there are particular portions of Intramuros that are not already not covered already by the walls. So that aspect is something that we look forward to completing already as well. So in the walled city, you will see a number of cultural and heritage spaces. You will see monuments, old structures, basically, that are, in a way, structures that remind us as well of our heritage and our culture, where we started, the struggles of every Filipino for the past 400 years as well. So you have, for example, the Manila Cathedral, which has undergone 8 reconstructions already. You also have, of course, the San Agustin, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the only Baroque church in Manila that is declared to be a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Then you also have, of course, the Puerta del Parian, which is open right now, and it's very quite near, of course, Lyceum of the Philippines. The Puerta del Parian was actually the main gate that was used by Chinese merchants in going inside the walled city. Nung mga panahon ng mga Kastila, bawal po ang mga Pilipino sa loob ng Intramuros. They're all basically asked to leave at 6 in the evening, and only you're either a member of the church or you're a member of the military elite to be inside the city. So you also have the Puerta de Santa Lucia, which is still you can see it as well right now. And of course, Puerto Real, which dates back to the earlier period of the Spanish period as well. It's still existing right now, as well as a garden, and the favorite venue for special events. The Ayuntamiento, which stands right now, is which was reconstructed a few years back, houses the Marble Hall, and this is basically the old site of the center of government in the Philippines. So it was the site of where the Spanish Governor General actually held his office there. And during the American period, this was also the site where we had a number of government offices. So the Senate, Congress, then you have a number, even the Supreme Court actually started inside the Ayuntamiento. And for now, it houses what we significantly referred to as the Marble Hall. So this is the Intendencia, which is very near the Pasig River, and you will see here basically this is the old customs building, and the reason why it's beside the Pasig River is for purposes of ensuring the proper customs rules are implemented during the Manila-Acapulco trade. So right now it's a ruin, but we intend basically, and we've been talking to the National Archives for the old Spanish records of the Philippines to move to the Intendencia already. So this is of course the Fort Santiago, that of course is the Fort Santiago Gate, which has been restored and right now properly being redeveloped as well to its original use. And in Magallanes Drive, you have the statue of Queen Isabel, which dates back to the 1800s, and we are now in discussions with the National Historical Commission of the Philippines for its proper restoration. Okay. Now, if you will note, as we said, Intramuros was basically the political and religious administrative capital of the country. And for that particular period of time, everything actually started inside the walled city. Okay. Now, I won't anymore go into the historical redevelopment of the space, but it's basically the story of Intramuros tells the story of the struggle of the Filipinos, not only from the Spanish period, but even it predates back even to the time of Ra Sulaiman and Rahamatanda. Now, Intramuros was particularly destroyed. 94% of the walled city was destroyed during the Battle of Manila in 1945. So what you see right now is actually all reconstructions. The walled city was reconstructed from a period of the 1960s, heavily in the 1970s, until right now is undergoing the process of restoration and redevelopment. But what is unique basically when we trace the period of the redevelopment of the district is that there were particular periods that we had to go through the redevelopment. Now, our agency, the Intramuros Administration, or what we all refer to as the IA, started actually 39 years ago. We will be celebrating our 40th year this coming month. But the reason basically why Intramuros Administration was created was because of a flaw in the rules. You will see the Palacio del Gobernador, makikita niyo po yung Palacio del Gobernador, which is right in front of the Manila Cathedral. That is way beyond the height limitations or restrictions. So the reason why IA was created was basically to correct an error in ensuring that proper conservation rules are actually observed. Now, for the past 39 years, there were several phases of redevelopment. There were actually several redevelopment plans that were presented from the 1972 up to the 1990s. There were 3 redevelopment plans that are actually presented. And sadly, none of those redevelopment plans were properly implemented. So what we are doing right now is to shift, go back to the basic of not just coming up with a redevelopment plan, but what we refer to as a conservation management plan. Because what we see basically as a challenge when we came in is that there is no common methodology in terms of observing conservation measures among national and local cultural agencies. There is really no common standards among the national agencies in terms of how conservation management should be done. So in an urban heritage district like Intramuros, this was really a challenge that we had to hurdle with. And of course, you have the problem of exposure or resiliency to disasters. We all know that Intramuros is basically within what we refer to as a earthquake challenge space. So what we intend to do is to introduce measures that will ensure the resiliency of the district so that if anything happens, you will still be able to see the structures that reflects the struggle of every Filipino. And of course, the other major problem that we are now dealing with is a matter of urbanization. So these are all the main challenges that we are trying to handle right now. So what we did basically is to adopt a common framework, and this is what we refer to as the UNESCO framework for urban heritage redevelopment. We adopted the urban heritage landscape approach. We identified first basically what are the doables from the period of 2 years and what are the implementables and doables for the period of until 2022. And what we basically have identified is to improve access. We do not want to isolate Intramuros anymore from the other areas of Manila, but we want to introduce it already in the new light as well. So basically for the past 2 years, what we've been doing is the major redevelopment of the district in terms of infrastructure. And we've done the proper land use mapping as well to ensure that everything is done properly in terms of redevelopment. Now, there's a traffic and mobility plan that was adopted 4 years ago. Unfortunately, that was not properly implemented. What we are doing right now is to accelerate that implementation of the traffic mobility plan. And the main challenge is basically how do we now ensure continuity in the life inside the walled district to ensure that everyone actually understands the privilege of being able to stay inside the district. And what we've been doing right now is basically to adopt a long-term approach of implementing the conservation management plan. The conservation management plan will actually precede any redevelopment or effort of the district. What we want to do is to ensure that there is the proper urban and identity design guidelines already in place after we've done the conservation management plan of Intramuros. The other approach is the inclusive development directions. And these are projects that are meant to ensure the inclusivity of the space. For our 40th year, what we wanted to highlight already are the people inside the district, the people who are actually part of the heritage and part of the effort to ensure the conservation of the district. Okay. So in terms of direction, the vision that we have adopted for 2022 is basically an inclusive, dynamic, and resilient Intramuros. There's a particular space in the Pasig River that 44 chambers that we will now be converting in what we refer to as the MICE Transit Creative Hub. That's 44 chambers that will house creativity and design excellence services. And this will be an iconic space for creative design services inside the walled city. Let me show you the last video basically that we basically sets the direction already for the next 3 years, remaining 3 years of the administration. And the focus right now is on the people who are actually part of the value of Intramuros. Last.
If there's something about Manila that hasn't changed ever since, it's the lovely sunrise and sunset. As if reminding us that in all the chaos, there's still beauty to find in this place we all call home. And moving around it every day, doing the things that we have to do, we completely forget the invaluable history that it holds and the endless possibilities it can achieve. As Intramuros administration celebrates its 40th year, we also celebrate its people. As we work together, inspire each other, and teach one another of the many ways why this city is a place we will always love to call home. Standing as one, so that we never forget the past that taught us how to survive, so we can move forward with a strong heart to build a future that we can all be proud of. We are Intramuros.
Now, what to expect basically in the coming years is an integration of Intramuros with the National Museum and also an integration with the National Park. We've started already this by the rehabilitation of the Plaza Gumburza Monument. What we hope to do is to ensure that there is access already between the Intramuros and the National Museum. And after that, we will now move forward to the integration and convergence with the National Park. So that's basically summarizes, and in terms of balancing the challenge of culture and heritage, it's basically ensuring inclusivity of the space as well. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you, Attorney Nunag and Attorney Asido. May I kindly request Attorney Nunag to join us here on stage for the open forum. Okay, so there are so many exciting things happening in Intramuros and in Bohol. So, Attorney Asido, it seems like you really are, together with other agencies, attached agencies also of the DOT, you're developing really what we call a tourism precinct or tourism bubble. So, really very exciting gathering places for locals and tourists. Okay, so the two of you actually talked about cultural preservation, cultural asset management, also as a way also to promote sustainability. So in terms of, let's say, challenges, let's say in the case of Bohol, how do we now integrate this culture of tourism in the establishments and also in the communities so that sustainable tourism actually becomes an agenda of the entire, let's say, province?
In the case of Bohol, the efforts are already being undertaken, but I don't think that's enough, and we shouldn't stop improving. There's a need for more awareness, especially at the grade, even starting at the grade school level, and especially a very useful and helpful group would be the students of tourism and hospitality, because they will be our frontliners. They will, in the future, be our managers, and they will be the ones who will be facing our visitors. And they should be among the first to know what we have and what we should treasure, especially in terms of our cultural assets. It's good, let me just add, it's good that in Bohol there are new developments. Like I said, the churches that fell or collapsed during the earthquake have been fully restored, and some are still in the process of restoration. And we have a new National Museum branch. It used to be the old Capitol building that was damaged by the earthquake, that was taken over by the National Museum. So now it's a brand new, fully restored structure, and it's starting to get filled with heritage and other treasures that are museum quality.
A major, actually, recommendation of Dr. Kimba earlier as part of the lessons from Boracay is to also address the issue of informal settlers, right? And Attorney Asido, you presented actually a framework for inclusive development. So may we know more or less like what to expect in terms of maybe more specifics or concrete or visible, things that we could see this year and maybe in the next year or two?
In terms of Intramuros, there are actually two challenges that were decided to confront with. One is the problem of the informal settlers. If you'll notice, there are still a number of informal settlers inside the district. The challenge basically right now is that they all live in private property. Wala na pong nakatira sa public land inside Intramuros. So what we've decided, and this is we have doing right now with the national housing agencies is that by next week, on the 27th of March, we will be signing with the Socialized Housing Finance Corporation a program that will address the informal settlers issue already. We have identified two major communities that will be the initial target for movement of the informal settlers. But what is unique about this program is that it's a socialized housing approach. And it's not just a matter of moving people outside the district, hindi lang po relocation, but we are also ensuring that there will be adequate social security in terms of their movement as well. So in the next 3 years, basically that is the major direction that we wanted already to address the informal settlers issue. There are 892 families actually informally living inside, but to relocate them is not just the answer. We need to ensure that wherever they will be moving, meron pong social security. There is also the means that they will be able to earn their livelihood. Karamihan po sa kanila, and you know this for a fact, yung mga students, is that they are selling here inside, mga vendors, they are pedicab drivers as well. So what we are trying to assure them is that any major change will also guarantee that they will be able to continue as well perhaps their business inside the district properly already. Hindi na po yung in terms of improper regulation.
Thank you, Attorney Asido. I also would like to inquire with Attorney Nunag also the case of the Bajaus and also the other informal settlers in Bohol. So how are you addressing this as part of sustainable tourism?
That's really something that needs to be adequately addressed, because there have been efforts in the past but very insufficient. The presence of the Bajaus, who typically live at the fringe of land and partly onshore, is now a continuing threat to the biodiversity and the ecological balance, especially of the Tagbilaran-Dawis channel. In fact, there's always a red tide pronouncement in that area. It's a significant number of families. They're growing, and of course, it's election time. They are voters, so that it has become a very serious challenge. Also, in terms of educating them, we're trying to get them into the schools, but the dropout rate is very high. So that has always been a challenge for the various provincial and municipal administrations where this community is located. Ongoing project.
Thank you, Attorney Nunag. There are fears that with the opening of the new Bohol International Airport in the island of Panglao, there will be, unexpected over-concentration, or as they call it, over-tourism in the island of Panglao because of the attractions of Alona Beach plus all the other resorts in that island. Now, may we know what, for example, the province of Bohol or the private sector and the communities are doing to ensure that we don't, go down, let's say, or we experienced what happened in the case of Barangay. So are there initiatives to disperse, for example, tourism to the other parts of Bohol?
In terms of dispersal, there have been initiatives already to bring some of the accommodation facilities to the mainland, but these are small efforts and I think baby steps. The bigger developments continue to be in the island of Panglao, and what is encouraging is that our main issue really there is wastewater management, particularly in the Alona area, which is our pocket Boracay. There have already been discussions with the TIEZA, with the support of the World Bank, to fund large-scale wastewater management system on the island of Panglao. There are still issues about easements. Let us see if after the elections moves will be done to enforce the violation, to enforce action against the violators, and we hope that the authorities will also be as firm as they were in Boracay, especially in the areas affected by these regulations. The private sector, particularly the Tourism Council, the Chamber of Commerce, the Association of Hotels and Resorts, have already come up with several resolutions urging the local government to enforce the environmental and easement regulations. We're still waiting for that until after the elections.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Nunag. I'd like to invite members from the audience to ask questions to Attorney Nunag and to Attorney Asido. Yes.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Chris Baleva. I'm from the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity. I'd just like to clarify, I'd just like to see clarification as regards to the status of the Bajau in Panglao Island. I'm wondering if they are migrants or if they are actually the indigenous peoples of Panglao Island, because I heard that they were referred to as informal settlers, so I'm a bit concerned about that. So perhaps a little clarification on the matter would be helpful. Thank you, sir.
They're all migrants from Mindanao.
Thank you. Any other questions?
John Forbes, AmCham again. On Intramuros, of course, you didn't have the advantage of, say, Penang or Hanoi, of not being badly destroyed under the Second World War, so you've been rebuilding. But that was over 70 years ago. At what point will you actually restore, or are you trying to restore, the entire Intramuros, what's within the walls, to what it was before? Because, and what will that cost, and how many administrations will it take? Because you have a tremendous complex here between what's inside the walls and the historic buildings that are nearby that can be a major tourism attraction in the world, not just in Asia.
Thank you for the question. Basically, the problem for the past 40 years is that every administrator who came in has his own perspective of what should be the redevelopment. But when we came in, we decided perhaps that now is not really the time to push for what we perceive to be a redevelopment. We should instead focus on what we need to conserve, because actually the value of the space is on the heritage aspect. And this I've said even to the Secretary of Tourism, that in terms of an urban heritage space like Intramuros, tourism should really be secondary. What we should matter really is the proper conservation of the space. If there is proper conservation, there are proper frameworks, plans in place, and that there are actually inclusivity of how that plan is going to be implemented in terms of the people who are actually living, staying inside, then tourists will actually follow. So what we are doing right now is basically to set that framework already through the conservation management plan. And that plan is actually the framework for any redevelopment effort later.
Thank you, Attorney Giller. Questions from our young, very, very young students here.
Hi, good morning, sir. I'm I'm Harvey from De La Salle Araneta University. We live in this age where the interest for history, culture, and heritage has been reignited, maybe because of social media and films such as General Luna and Goyo. I guess my question is, as part of the younger generation and a part of as future tourism practitioners, where should we go from here? What can we do to help improve this this part of our tourism industry?
I think the answer can be, the one best answer will be creativity. The youth today are very creative. So what we've been doing right now, for instance, in Intramuros is not to just limit ourselves to the usual marketing and communications of products. So we've been gone to the extent, for example, of what we now have, Intramuros special edition beep cards. Those beep cards, as you're aware of, can be used for the e-treks inside the district. And right now, they can also be used for the LRT, MRT. So in integration aspect, we are not just marketing and communicating the district, but we are also using the available technologies right now. And we are heavily reliant on social media, but the messaging has to be precise also. And we're very precise on the messaging. And what we want basically is to ensure na yung heritage, culture, should be creatively phrased in such a manner na maintindihan ng bagong generation. So an example will be like next month for August, we're leading the way, for example, of an Intramuros open cinema. So there are 2 films that will actually be shown for free. The story of Jose Abad Santos, who died in the Second World War. Then we will again rescreen Ang Larawan. So these are actually 2 stories of the struggle of Filipinos and 2 historical narratives set. One is actually set inside Intramuros, yung Larawan, and these are actually being offered for free for people and for the younger generation to really be more appreciative of. Kaya the key basically is ensuring that everything be done creatively.
And Attorney Luna?
I think there are 2 skills of the youth that could be tapped for heritage preservation. One is the storytelling aspect. The young ones are very good storytellers, and they could address their audience, especially also the youth. And with the use of social media, they're very high-tech. They can very quickly and widely disseminate what they know. And that would be a big contribution to heritage preservation if we sort of direct these skills towards telling the gospel of preservation of our heritage.
Okay, thank you very much, Attorney Nunag. Okay, so with this discussion, I'd like to thank everyone, and I'd like to close this second half of the Travel Talk session. So let's all give a round of applause to Attorney Nunag and to Attorney Guiller Asido for joining us this morning and sharing their expertise on cultural asset preservation and management. Thank you. Attorney.
Thank you, Dr. Rodolfo, for facilitating our panel sessions wonderfully. I would just like to take a moment to acknowledge the presence of LPU President Attorney Roberto P. Laurel. Thank you, sir, for gracing our event with your presence. Okay, so I believe it's time to take a breather from the serious discussions for just a bit. let's all welcome on stage Miss Aliana Marie Lapasaran from the LPU Chorale.
Bayan kong Pilipinas, lupain ng kito't bulaklak, pag-ibig sa kaniyang balat, nakalay ng ganda at dilag, at sa kanyang yumi at ganda, dayuhan ay nahalina. Bayan ko, binihag ka, nasadlak sa dusa. Iwan mong may dayang lumipad, kulungin mo at umiiyak. Bayan pa kayang sakal dilag, ang dimag nasang makaalpas. Pilipinas kong minumutya, pugad ng luha ko't dalita, aking adhika, makita kang saktan, laya. Saknal dilag, ang dimag nasang makaalpas. Pilipinas kong minumutya, pugad na luha ko't dalita, aking adhika, makita kang saktan, laya.
Thank you, Aliana, for that refreshing performance. Now, I would like to call back to the stage Dr. Rodolfo for her synopsis of today's session.
I won't sing. I wish I could sing like her. That's in my dreams. Okay. So allow me to at least share with you some of the insights that became very prominent in today's first travel talk of the Tourism Knowledge Center, powered by Raja Travel Corporation. So I think the first key takeaway is that tourism is here to stay. Tourism is our very powerful economic engine, and it's not something that we could easily, remove or take away from those that have actually depended their lives, their children's education, their families' health provisions on their tourism livelihood. And the experience of Boracay clearly showed that we really have to do a lot in order to further avoid what we call, actually in the field of economics, the tragedy of the commons that arise from our abuse of our common resources. And the Philippines, as shown by Dr. Mundita Lim earlier, actually has very diverse and very rich natural tourism assets, and we can use them to our advantage. And as she pointed out, tourism and biodiversity need not be in conflict with each other. Instead, they can actually support one another. And even in the discussion of sustainable development, tourism is often mentioned as a very powerful platform to achieve sustainable development in the same way that you can make tourism actually sustainable. Now, the second point that I'd like to make emanates from what Dr. Inigo, Ms. Clemente, Dr. Kimba, and Dr. Mundita also emphasized, and that is evidence-based research. And that is where the academe, the young people, and even the private sector and government are being called to actually join this advocacy for evidence-based research and actions. Because it's only by using really evidence in crafting our strategic directions and our action programs and strategic tasks that we can actually make use of tourism as a way to avoid the tragedy of the commons and make it a story of the triumph of the people, as I've always emphasized in today's travel talk. Now, the third is the role of the private sector. And in the presentations of Attorney Nunag and Attorney Asido a while ago, they emphasized the role also of the private sector, particularly in cultural preservation, and in the case of Bohol, also in natural resource management. And when I talk about private sector, I refer not only to private businesses, but also to the communities, community organizations, people organizations, cooperatives, and most especially the youth. You know, you actually occupy 95% of the space in this room. You are part of this private sector, and you have a long way to go in contributing to our pursuit of sustainable development. Now, the major role actually is on responsible conduct, particularly responsible business conduct, conducting this due diligence. And on the part of the youth, you are called actually to utilize your resources, and one of your major resource is actually your creativity. And creativity is a very good platform for achieving innovations. Which brings me now to the next point. For tourism to become sustainable, we need to introduce innovations. And the Knowledge Center actually is a platform for consolidating and expanding the base for innovation. So innovation doesn't apply just to manufacturing industries. Innovation is very crucial in our creative economy. And at the heart of tourism actually is creativity. And as pointed out by Attorney Nunag a while ago, the youth are very good in storytelling. So through your creative spirits and your creative resources, you can do a lot in changing the story of Philippine tourism, and it will be more towards preservation, conservation, while at the same time generating the benefits for all of us. And my last point is that this travel talk session is just the first for us to be able to actually connect with each other. This is the first travel talk session where we try to bring together actually the members or partners of the network, and an opportunity to invite more to join us. So if we look at the case, for example, of telecommunications industry, transportation, like airlines, shipping, okay, their sustainability depends to a large extent on how they're able to build networks. Okay, because in building networks, they gain what we call economies of scale and economies of scope. With the same inputs, they can actually achieve more. And that is really the main role of this Knowledge Center right now. So we encourage everyone to actually utilize this Knowledge Center platform as a way for you to communicate your ideas, to communicate ways on how we can all work together in order to achieve this balance between or among the pillars of sustainable tourism: people, planet, and profit. But let's not forget a very crucial element which binds the three together, and that is what we call the institutions. And each one of us actually is a part of that institution. And a very, very powerful institution right now is, we have you all here, the youth. Okay, so regardless of age, we're all young people, I should say. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for the session, and I'll call Joe, okay, to introduce the next part of the program.
We now move on to another exciting portion of our program. We will be launching the Fort Santiago microsite. To get things started, I would like to call again Miss Eileen Clemente of Raja Travel to tell us a little more about this.
So thank you again. We're very excited. We're launching the first developed microsite for Intramuros administration, which is for the Fort Santiago. So you can actually go on your mobile phones and go to visitfortsantiago.com, which we are also featuring here. This is a way for us to really make each tourist site very visible to the tourists when they search. So now that when you search, it shouldn't be the blogger that should be first on the search engine, but the actual site of Fort Santiago. We thank you. We thank Intramuros administration, Attorney Asido, and the rest of the board of Intramuros administration for allowing us to do this. So please watch out for the rest, because right now we only have Fort Santiago, but we will be launching also Casa Manila, Baluarte de San Diego, Museo de Intramuros, as well as for Bohol. We are slating also, after signing of the agreement, hopefully the Tarsier Foundation and Abatan River, and also for Palawan. Please watch out for these. This makes everything more seamless for the tourists and the travelers. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Clemente. May I also call to the stage Attorney Asido of the Intramuros administration for his thoughts on this.
Thank you, Eileen. Earlier, we see my immediate boss before, Director Nunag, emphasized innovation. And this is really an innovation being introduced by both Raja Tours and with the Knowledge Center and also Intramuros administration. So the purpose basically is to provide a seamless experience for visitors of Intramuros. So we all know for a fact that everything is mobile, everything right now should be seamless. So this effort is an undertaking in support of that effort already. So we hope that you will also visit the site of the microsite, and we would like to personally thank as well the leadership of Raja Travel for this effort of choosing Intramuros to be one of the first partners of the Tourism Knowledge Center. Everyone who spoke here before was a former government official. I think I'm the only one left. Alan, who used to be the undersecretary, was actually, as everyone said, was spearheaded this effort, and we would like to thank everyone actually for this undertaking of choosing Intramuros to be the first site for the seamless experience of visitors. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney. May I call on stage again Ms. Eileen and Attorney Asido to formally launch the Visit Fort Santiago microsite. How about a round of applause for the Fort Santiago microsite? So again, we would like to invite everyone to check out the new microsite www.visitfortsantiago.com. To cap off our event, I would like to call on stage Dr. Lilibet C. Aragon, Dean of the College of International Tourism and Hospitality Management, Lyceum of the Philippines, University, Manila.
It's already afternoon, so I would like to greet everyone. Good afternoon. On behalf of the Lyceum of the Philippines University, College of International Tourism and Hospitality Management, of course, we would like to thank Raja Travel Corporation, of course, as headed by Ms. Eileen Clemente, for bringing to our humble university the first Travel Talk series. The presence of our partner schools, the distinguished speakers that we had this morning, the public and private sector, people from the government, and then people from all walks of life who have joined us this morning is a true testament that we are really moving towards, sustainable tourism. And the more engaged, the more involved we are, then the more we can push the progression of this industry we are in. So, on behalf of the Lyceum of the Philippines University, may I call on stage Dr. Conrado Inigo, our Vice President for Academic Affairs. We also would like to call on stage the President of Raja Travel Corporation, Ms. Eileen Clemente. And we would like to give this simple certificate of appreciation to Raja Travel Corporation for spearheading the first Travel Talk series with the theme Balancing Economic and Conservation Objectives Towards Sustainable Tourism, in line with the Lyceum of the Philippines University TKC partnership, given this 19th day of March 2019 at the JPL Hall of Freedom, Lyceum of the Philippines University, Manila. Signed, yours truly, and Dr. Conrado Inigo Jr., Vice President for Academic Affairs. Once again, thank you very much, Raja. I'll go back here, and of course I would also like to thank the support of the administration of our university, LPU, and to all our partner school. As mentioned, this is just the first of the Travel Talk series, and we hope to partner with all of you soon. This is not just an event, this is an advocacy that we have to be strongly engaged with. Again, a pleasant afternoon, and God bless us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Aragon. Thank you once again to everyone for joining us for the first Travel Talk session brought to you by Raja Travel Corporation's Tourism Knowledge Center and the Lyceum of the Philippines University, Manila. We hope to see you all again in our next Travel Talk. We wish everyone a pleasant afternoon.